Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be taking a look at a few interesting things. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know down in the comments below what you think and what movies or TV shows or trailers you'd like us to review and react to. But today we're going to be taking a look at the 2025 movie Thunderbolts asterisk. And it's very important, as I've learned, that you're supposed to include asterisks in there because it's not just Thunderbolts, it's Thunderbolts asterisks.
Is there a special way to say that, or we're just going to call it the Thunderbolts asterisk sign?
Well, I mean, we could say hashtag Thunderbolts, but people might get confused about that.
Oh, well, no, we're not going to do that. That's for sure. So
yeah, I mean that's just gonna take us down a very weird path. But before we dive in, Lee, it has been quite a very interesting week. I mean, apart from a lot of things going on around the world, the biggest one being the election of a new pope. And Lee, since you are,
I was wondering where you're going with this. So okay.
Well, we might as well get it out of the way because this channel is called The Movie Pope, and we did do a review of Conclave. So Lee, as the supreme pontiff of the box office, can you give your quick thoughts on the new Pope Leo the 14th? Any words of encouragement?
I wish Bob the best. I know he'll rock it out. And interesting, I think of the first pope from the U.S. So interesting.
From Chicago, and he's a White Sox fan.
Well, geez, he must not believe in God. Let me not go there. So let's go ahead.
I was going to imagine you would also say, you stick to religion, I'll stick to movies. All right, like that kind of thing.
Also be that. So, but yeah. So
let's go and dive into Thunderbolts. Now, I will say this right now. If you haven't seen the movie yet, and you don't want any spoilers, then please go and check out the trailer reaction we did for Thunderbolts, or check out other videos that we've done recently. We did a very in-depth discussion about the casting video for Avengers Doomsday. That's out there. Check it out. We also did a very in-depth discussion about Fantastic Four First Step, so check that out. But otherwise, if you've already seen the movie or you just don't care, you just want to hear what our thoughts are, then please proceed. So Lee, we saw this movie last week in theaters, and we kind of went into it pretty much with very low expectations. Would you say that's a very fair assessment?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. After the schlock we've been getting in that in the Avengers world, I was not expecting much of anything from this.
Now, technically, this movie is supposed to mark the end of Phase 5, but I think I think anybody would be forgiven if they kind of lost count of all the phases, because I certainly have. I mean, I remember them saying, Avengers Endgame was the end of this Phase 4, and then somehow we ended up in Phase 5, and then they had this grand plan of we're going to do the multiverse with Loki, and then Jonathan Majors ended up getting into some deep legal troubles, and then, well, here we are now.
I actually even forgot about the phases until you brought it up again, so that's how little I'm paying attention to that. But yes, it was after some very diligent research on your part that we found out that it is indeed the end of Phase 5.
A very memorable phase, I might add. But
yes.
But Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us into Thunderbolts asterisks?
Yes, indeed, yes. So, and I'll just be referencing as Thunderbolts, so hopefully that doesn't cause a lot of confusion with the audience. So
right. In case I get confused with any other movie called Thunderbolts,
Exactly. So the story starts off, and we're following Yelena, who is, needless to say, she's unhappy, or I guess you could say unfulfilled with her current role.
She's having an existential crisis because she kind of goes into a very interesting monologue.
Yes. She does have a very interesting monologue about how she's unhappy with her role as a covert secret operative, and she's kind of under the direction of Valentina De Fontaine, who's played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And Yelena ends up kind of confiding in the Red Guardian about her unhappiness with that role. And this kind of prompts her to talk with Dave Fontaine because Yelena wants to have a more publicly, I guess I would say, publicly visible role, right? She wants to be kind of more of a face. She doesn't want to be kind of walking behind in the shadows, which I think is a kind of a nice callback, right, to obviously her quote-unquote sister, Black Widow, who was, always kind of working covert, but when she joined the Avengers, obviously gets a lot of limelight in that type of role. So I thought it was kind of a nice little touch that Yelena kind of wants to follow in her footsteps.
Well, it's kind of interesting that she really doesn't want to leave that life. She just wants to kind of shift the way her role is. It's not like she's saying, well, I'm just getting tired of killing. I want out. Maybe I want to go do something else. It's like, well, I do enjoy the killing. Maybe I just want people to kind of see my face,
Yeah. I think it's a little bit more. She doesn't want to be as clandestine, I guess, with how everything's happening. So having this role would be at least a little bit more, I guess, amenable to her. And like I said, I think just how it echoes with her sister, I think will go to the overarching thing, which I won't talk about until near the end. But it is something that's, kind of in the back of my mind because, you have Dave Fontaine, like she agrees to have, kind of give Yelena this type of role. But she has to do the old one last job, right? The old cliche, you got to do one more job for me. Wink, wink, this never turns out bad for anybody. And we find out very quickly that this last job is obviously a ruse for Dave Fontaine, and she's kind of bringing together all these other secret ops agents together, and kind of this kind of clever plot where she kind of seeks them on one another to ultimately kill each other is the end goal here, because she sends them down to this, to this like kind of remote lab. That's kind of built up to self-destruct with them involved with it. So this is where we meet our new Avengers, right? And I'm going to call them the new Avengers because they talk about that in the film. So they're just going to be the new Avengers.
We'll keep in mind. I mean, during this entire time, Dave Fontaine is basically being grilled by Congress. So
yes,
that's pretty much the reason why she's doing all of this. It's not like she just got bored one day and it's like, maybe I should just off all of my ops. It's like she's basically trying to cover trail.
That's the ongoing subplot that I didn't even really bother mentioning because it's just a weak reason to get everyone together. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There is this kind of ongoing plot. Same thing with Bucky, who's in this role. He has some stuff, but we'll get to him momentarily. But yeah, so we meet kind of our new Avengers, right? Or we meet the Thunderbolts, whatever we want to call them. So you have Yelena, right? And, you have John Walker, right? Who's a U.S. agent. And
formerly Captain America.
Yes. And I think it's important to know that, like, when you look back at all these characters, they're not exactly in these big things, right? So John Walker, he's from, if you never watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right, you're not going to know who this guy is. Same thing with Ava Star, or however it's pronounced, right, who plays Ghost, or who is Ghost, excuse me. She's from Ant and the Wasp. So if you never saw that, this character is not going to resonate with you. And we also get Taskmaster as well, who's also from Black Widow.
Right.
So you bring all these characters together, right? And the first thing that kind of went through my head was, is it too soon to do an ensemble cast for these group of characters, just knowing that they're not like mainstream, right? They're not super popular. You've kind of had to follow a lot in order to get here. Was this a good move to have kind of this ensemble cast? What did you think about that, bringing all these characters together?
I mean, you're basically taking a bunch of B-listers and putting them in a movie and hoping that everybody will connect with it.
Yeah.
We mentioned it when we did the trailer reaction. It's one of those things where if you don't watch these shows or these movies, you're going to be lost. So, So so I mean, obviously, you and I, we have the misfortune of having to watch these things in order to kind of make them more explainable to the audiences.
Yeah.
Unless you're a diehard fan or you just really like Marvel, when you watch these movies, you're just going to sit and ask yourselves, um, so who the hell are these people? Like they just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I will say though, I mean, because the entire plot of the government taking a bunch of B-listers or would be villains and putting them in a government role obviously harkens back to the Suicide Squad, which came out a few
Exactly.
years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say with the Suicide Squad, these are characters that we've never really heard of, right? So, Lee, if I just came up, if I just came up to you and said, Lee, tell me about Bloodsport, who is he? You would probably look at me like I grew a third head. Or if I said, Lee, tell me a little bit about Peacemaker, do you know who he is? You would say, is he like a hippie superhero?
Now he's got a TV show. I've actually seen the TV show, and they just had the season 2 trailer pop up of that. So
right,
for
yeah.
any Peacemaker fans out there. But no, I know exactly what you mean. They're not.
Yeah, but the thing is that with DC, there's almost an expectation of us not knowing who these people are, because the entire point of the Suicide Squad is to take no-name heroes, people who we've never heard of, and people who even the heroes have never heard of, and kind of put them on this mission, because if something happens to them, no one's going to miss them, right? That's kind of the point. The Thunderbolts, it's more of like this haphazard, let's just get a bunch of these people, put them together, and let's see what happens kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point. I didn't even really think about that when I was talking about it, because I was like, yeah, these, with something like the Suicide Squad, like they're just a bunch of faceless people we don't even know. These, we actually have like stuff attached to them, and it just feels like kind of a poor excuse to bring them together, because it's like, well, we've already kind of shown them on screen. Right. Let's just kind of throw them together and see what happens. So that's
what's funny about that is that we let's say, for instance, John Walker, for instance, like we only see him for like 2 episodes. I'm just going to throw a number, 2 episodes, right? But in the 2 episodes, you're supposed to know enough about him to where when you see him on screen, you're like, oh my God, it's US Agent, it's John Walker. I'm so glad he's back. And it's like, well, we haven't seen him that much to begin with, and the same goes for Ghost. Like you only see Ghost for maybe like 30 minutes out of a 2-hour movie, and when you see her again, I mean, is the expectation for us to like clap our hands giddily and say, "Oh my God, I'm so glad Alva's back!" Like I was so wondering what's happening. I'm like, I barely know who these people are. You spend the entire movie and TV shows propping up, Bucky Barnes and Sam Wilson and Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. Like I barely have time to notice who any of the other people are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up something interesting, right? Because Taskmaster, right? So a character that showed up in Black Widow, who
was only around for like maybe 10 minutes, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. And talk about totally minimum screen time, right?
Yeah, because she's a mute. She doesn't say anything. So
I know. She doesn't have a great on-screen presence in any form. And kind of an interesting choice here. And I have to admit, I was not expecting this, right? They killed her off, right? And I was just like, that's interesting. Like, I didn't really care a lot, but it was interesting that they decided to kill off a character.
Yeah, but it was
Why
fitting.
do you personally feel like they killed Taskmaster off?
But it was fitting. I mean, what was she going to do? I mean, you're talking about someone who can mimic the fighting styles of any of the heroes, right? So in the grand scheme of things, like as we see later on in the movie, it seems kind of pointless to have 2 people, running around with the shield, throwing it around and hoping to hit something. Plus, plus Taskmaster wasn't impactful in Black Widow anyway, right? It was just more of a chance for Romanoff to kind of make peace with her inner demons, really. So I mean, going forward, I mean, it was a Game of Thrones situation where we see them, and then next thing you know, that they basically end up like Ned Stark, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for me, it was her death was inconsequential because she was never going to play a bigger role in the movie anyway.
Of course, yeah.
But a part of me was kind of wondering, so are we going to see any more of the characters get offed? I mean.
Mhm.
I'm not saying to be sadistic, but I'm just saying some of these characters. I'm thinking, what kind of role can we expect from them? You know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it does give it some form of stakes, right? In a kind of like a movie that you're going into with not a whole lot of expectations, not having like all of your characters with the inevitable plot armor did kind of maybe set up like, huh, these characters could be killed in theory. A character that maybe I don't care a lot about, but it's like, I kind of know them from the screen. I also think as well with that, I think that out of all these characters, right, which is not saying a lot, I feel like Taskmaster probably received the most negative feedback over how they were introduced into the MCU. That I felt like it was probably a good reason just to get her off the screen. Because
Right.
I think that nobody liked how Taskmaster was depicted. So, like, you know what? This character, we don't know it. We kind of butcher her Black Widow. Let's just whatever, right? She's just gonna be killed off. Let's move on with the
Yeah, I mean,
movie.
Kevin Feige probably got a lot of fan mail saying, "Please kill Taskmaster," and he was just like, "You know what? Let's give the people what they want." You know, it's like it's like how many Twitter posts can he read where it says, hashtag kill Taskmaster? Or he's like, you
Yeah.
know what? Let's do it. I mean, the people have spoken.
Yep. There we go. Got to get her off the screen, and they did, right? And it was sudden and abrupt, and I mean, they barely paid any attention to it. I think like she kind of came up a little bit later, but it was just like there to happen. There's another character that we also meet, and that's Bob, right? Bob, kind of plays this kind of interesting, like I'm gonna say like amnesiac type of character because he doesn't really remember how he got there.
Mhm.
But he does end up playing this kind of an interesting role, and it was one where I felt like I wanted to see them do a better job with how they utilized it because Bob is able to, I guess, kind of like witness events. Like he's able to like witness past events for these characters by contact. I don't really know how to describe it because like he just kind of has like all these powers, which we'll find out later. But like that's one of his abilities. I thought it was kind of interesting because it gives us some glimpses into some of the characters. You get kind of this flashback that we see a decent bit with Yelena about like some like really early Red Room types of stuff that she was doing with one of her, I guess, friends that gets killed. You also kind of see a little bit of John Walker, and you kind of see how his life has spiraled out of control. But then we never actually see anything for Ghost, or at least not that I remember. Did we ever see anything for Ghost, like a
Mm.
flashback or anything?
No, it was mainly focused on Walker and Yelena.
Yeah, which is it was weird to me. It's like
It
if
was,
you're going to
it's-
introduce this character, right?
yeah.
Why and I mean, like, you do it for two of the like three main leads that are there, right? Why not do it for Ghost? I don't know. I thought that was really odd that they didn't want to give her more characterization. So I don't know. Felt like a weird thing. Was it like a huge hole to you? Like it's like
See,
if you're
when
gonna bother with two, why not just do the third as well?
see when they were doing that, I was thinking, okay, so Yelena and Walker are safe. So at some point, Ava's going to either get killed or she's going to sacrifice herself because we
Hmm,
don't. That's what I was thinking because it's like,
interesting.
because if they're going through all this trouble of showing their background and kind of trying to tug at our heartstrings and make us feel a certain way for the characters, then yeah, I mean that should be the kind of the wink and the nod from the filmmakers and letting us know, yeah, these guys are safe, don't worry about it. But then
We'll see.
we don't see anything
Would
for
be
Ghost. It's like,
or is that their death flag, right? So could you look at the reverse and be like, oh, look, John Walker's having flashbacks of his kid. Like, it's going to
yeah,
make the audience feel a lot worse when he's like redeeming himself. He's like, oh, I got to do this for my kid. And he sacrifices himself. But no, I totally get what you mean there. It is a very kind of an interesting choice. I thought that it's like we focus on these two characters, and then the third one, yeah, just kind of was like blah. She's there, but we're not going to give her the same thing. And I mean, I guess it's a more interesting way of, I guess, giving us like it's not really exposition in the normal sense, right? It's not like it feels a little bit more organic, and I'm saying that very lightly because I feel like they just kind of gave him this power that he doesn't. It's just like, here, whatever, you have like telepathy powers or whatever. And I mean, it handles a lot better than something uh, like the movie we were just talking about before. The what's that other collaborative superhero film that I'm drawing a blank on?
What, Superman?
No. The one that we were just talking about at the beginning with all the villains coming together.
Oh, the Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. I was just drawing a blank on that. But I remember in Suicide Squad when they're all getting together and they're doing. They're just like, oh, hey, we're just gonna all sit here, drink at this bar, and let's just talk about each other's backstories. I'm like, okay, that's really pathetic. This at least had a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, it was more imaginative.
Yes. I'll give them at least a little bit of props for trying to get something in there. But yeah, so Taskmaster gets murdered, right? And we have our 4 characters: Yelena, John Walker, Ghost, and Bob. And they need to kind of escape this building now. But we see that the building has now been kind of surrounded by these troops from Dave Fontaine because they see that Bob is actually alive when he was presumed to be dead. So they're like, hey, cool, this guy survived all these experiments. We need to capture him now, even though it's not exactly, I mean, we don't really know anything about his abilities or anything at this stage, so it's kind of weird that they're obsessed with that. But we see the characters able to escape, and Bob, I'm going to put quotations here, sacrifices himself so the remaining part of the group can get out. But really, this was a way for Bob to kind of unlock his powers, right? Because he's kind of doesn't know a lot about his past, doesn't really seem like he has any abilities. But then he gets shot like 100 times, and then you're like, oh, he's actually alive. And this is kind of where he awakens his powers, but ultimately gets captured. But it's kind of what jettisons the plot moving forward. And I guess it's a good thing to talk about Bob. So Bob is the character sentry, or the hero. I don't even know if I want to say hero. It's the character sentry.
Yeah, he's kind of a mixed bag because
yes.
Because depending on how he's feeling, he could either be the sentry or he could be the void.
Yes, exactly. So it kind of an interesting thing there, but it kind of brings up something to me that really bugged me as we see it further. Would you say that Bob is a mentally stable person?
No, and they even make a point later on in the movie where they say you give Steve Rogers a super soldier serum, it kind of amplifies who he is as a person already. So
yeah.
So they said something about Steve Rogers was already a noble character. Like all you had to do was just give him the serum and it kind of showed us who he really was. Whereas if you give someone who's not right in the head, you don't really know what you're getting, right? You don't know if you're going to get someone who is like Steve Rogers or someone who could possibly be like a Thanos character or Kang or whatever.
Yeah, and it just blew my mind because it's just like, this guy, right? And we find out like through some of his past, like he had a troubled past just like everybody else. His father beat him and everything. But at his current stage in life, like I think right before the experiments, like he was doing a lot of drugs. Obviously seems to have some other mentally unstable things that are going on. I'm like, wow, who you don't want to give a lot of powers to? Someone that's like this. So, Dave Fontaine, not exactly calling her a genius or anything, but seemed like a huge misfire to be doing these experiments where you're hoping that these people are going to get powers, but you're giving powers to someone that's clearly not in his right frame of mind. And,
yeah, she's not a good judge of character, right? She's
not in the slightest, or just not a very good choice of like how you want to do experiments too. It's kind of like, I think, to The Boys, right? Where you see, I kind of see like these characters get powers, and a lot of them are very unhinged.
I
That's
was gonna say, like, you could even go further back to to 2008, where Samuel Stearns kind of does the experiment on Blonsky, and he turns into the
oh
Abomination.
yes,
And
yeah, absolutely right.
he ends up tearing half of New York, and then has to take Bruce Banner to kind of reel him in.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of, like I said, poor decisions where you're doing these experiments, and I get that that's probably part of it, but on the off chance that something does happen, probably don't want to have it to someone that is, for lack of a better term, crazy, right? So you kind of have them doing kind of their stuff on the side with Dave Fontaine and Sentry. And you kind of see our characters, right? Our Thunderbolts. They, kind of escaped this lab or wherever they were at in the middle of nowhere. And you see them kind of run into the Red Guardian, who was coming to warn them about everything that happened. Of course, quite a bit late, but his heart was in the right place.
He's the comic relief of the entire movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt. And I always like David Harbour for the role. Like, the guy's just goofy, and he really sells it as being kind of this really goofy character. Definitely a bright spot in the movie for us. But yeah, so like to see Red Guardian there.
Well, let me ask you this. Because throughout the entire movie, he's very much eager to kind of put the Thunderbolts together, and it's like, yeah, we're the Thunderbolts. We can go do this. We can go do that. Did you feel like he kind of overdid it at some points, where he was like just trying to like push this this team thing on them over and over again, or did you feel like it was kind of appropriate given his character?
I think it was appropriate for his character. I totally understand where you're going from, because it does feel like the whole idea of the Thunderbolts just comes out of thin air, because I don't think the characters think of themselves as being a part of a team or a group, and it's really his persistence, I think, ultimately, like, kind of, I guess, gets them to all come together. But in that same token, I think it does fit very well for his character that he kind of looks at this as kind of a group. And I think kind of the overarching theme of, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, is like dealing with depression. I think kind of gave it a little bit more of an interesting touch to it. But I want to save that discussion towards the end. But I do think it was kind of a goofy thing that maybe was a little bit over the top, but I think worked well for kind of the moral of the story. Because he finds them all out in the middle of the desert, right, and is bringing them back, and you see, the troops have kind of caught up to them. And lo and behold, a character I was not expecting to see a whole lot of shows up, and they're saved by Bucky Barnes, right?
Congressman Bucky Barnes. Don't forget, he's
Senator Bucky Barnes, right? So, we have him showing up to save them, but really he's kind of has his own means for why he wants to capture them, but captures them all the same. And I know that Bucky has a story beat in this, right? Like, his whole story beat is like he's a senator now, and he's trying to uncover some of the nefarious things that Dave Fontaine's doing to kind of help with everything that's happening, right? That's his story beat. But I have to ask you, was Bucky really that important to the story, or why did they feel like they needed to include him?
I mean, I felt like he got shoehorned in. Like, it's kind of like a Pedro Pascal thing, where they kind of have to just insert him into every Marvel project now. But I kind of feel like he's kind of that link between the old Avengers team and the new one.
Okay, yep.
That's how I see it. It's kind of like it's because if you just said, oh, these guys are the new Avengers, it would be a bit jarring. So you kind of need that link in between to kind of just let them know that there's like a transference of power.
I gotcha, actually, and the whole time I was thinking, like, God, it just feels so weird and out of place. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, I guess, and I would agree with you, right? That's exactly where I kind of landed on this after I thought about it a little bit more. He is there to kind of tie things together, right? Because we don't really know the rest of these characters. Like, they don't have much things. Like, he's never met the majority of these characters that I can remember. Don't quote me on that because you have so much. I mean, other than I know for sure he's worked with John Walker and he's probably saw Yelena. I don't know if he's ever met Ghost. Obviously doesn't know Bob or anything, but he is kind of a very loose way of getting back to it. But I don't know. In that same token, I just wish, if you want to create this new cast, why bring in old blood, right? Like, we've already kind of, I think, experienced everything with these other characters. Why bring in a guy that just like he's just like kind of around? And at this stage, I feel like we've probably seen more of Bucky Barnes than any other hero at this stage because he just keeps showing up unexpectedly to shit.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say this too because it also just seems a bit awkward because because with projects like She-Hulk, for instance, obviously it would make sense for us to see the Hulk in there because they're both Hulks and there's kind of a relationship going on, both familiar and the fact that they both share the same power. So it kind of makes sense that you would have that link because of the fact that they're both coming from the same background. You could say the same thing with John Walker and Sam Wilson because both of them were presumptive heirs to the mantle of Captain America.
Yep.
Whereas here it's just a mixed bag. It's like you've got some connection here, but it's not really connecting. So you kind of have to rely on witty banter and I guess back and forth to hopefully make it all work. You know.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. And I think, and I like how they did kind of explain away, like, oh, we can't get Sam Wilson here because of X reasons. So they very cleverly were like, hey, we know the audience is going to question why we're not seeing all these characters again. And they felt the need to talk about that. But yeah, but we got Bucky. He's back in this and, kind of, like I said, plays a significant role throughout. So the group decides, like, hey, cool, we have to go rescue or save Bob from Dave Fontaine, who is now working at the Avengers Tower, which it was just like, why? Like, what's the purpose? I mean, I guess, like, because you're trying to make them the quote-unquote new Avengers, like, that's a part of the whole gimmick. But, God, it just feels like such a weird thing. Like, I would feel like you don't want to constantly make people think about the Avengers because people have this really soft spot for it because we saw all these films and we had this huge climax and some of them die. Like, I think a lot of people have that vision and you can't be tone deaf to all the people out there that are saying, like, hey, cool, I don't like to see Sam Wilson as Captain America. We already had Captain America, right? I think She-Hulk saw a lot of bad press because it's like, oh, it's just, a female version of Hulk. Like, why do we want to see that? We already have this character. I mean, you could pretty much do that for everybody, right? The same thing with the
Hawkeye
Iron Heart, right?
Yeah, and Hawkeye as well with Kate Bishop.
Yeah, with Kate Bishop. Though I with her, I guess, like, it's a little bit, I don't know, I guess because she is more like down to earth. I don't have as many issues. It's like when people just get powers, really, it's fine. I digress. But it is something where it's like, I think it was very weird to use the Avengers Tower as kind of this focal point to the story because I feel like it's like you just don't want to let go of what you had. And I think for Marvel, right, you just have to move on, but they keep just wanting to, like, bring back all these old things, I guess, for nostalgia's sake. I don't know, but I thought it was a weird decision that they went back to Avengers.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, what else can they do? I mean, it's like it's like they're still sitting on their laurels and they're still trying to remind people, hey,
That's true.
you guys remember the Avengers, right? We did that. That was us. Like, and you remember the Tower? Yeah, that's where all of your favorite Avengers movies took place. So. Let's go back and see what it's like.
Let's be happy with these new people, right? The Thunderbolts that we create. I mean, not really created because we've seen them all before, but hey,
we cobble together. Like, these are the
we've seen them before. That's good enough. So, but
they're sort of connected with the Avengers, so why not?
Yeah, That's true. That's true. They've been in movies that have also had the Avengers in it, so it's gotta be something. But yeah, we see, D. Fontaine is kind of like manipulated Bob, right? Because Bob not really in a good headspace. So she's been kind of doing all this manipulation. You kind of get this feeling that she's trying to be very motherly to him. And I think
she's
that's part
failing
of
really, really badly.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, I was gonna say the biggest manipulation was having him dye his hair.
Oh yes. It was not very subtle, right? When he kind of takes the form of Sentry, wearing all gold with the blonde hair, and I'm sure it's comic book accurate, or someone could post about it if it's not. But I'm sure that there's probably some good thing that this clearly trying to be this very strong beacon of justice, right? But Bob with all these powers, and like I said, he has all these powers, right? And he could totally he really just makes nothing of the Thunderbolts. He's like, I don't want to call him like Superman, but like he clearly has like a lot of abilities that
he's a parody of, well, I wouldn't say parody, but a pastiche of Superman.
Gotcha.
Really.
Okay, and that makes sense, right? Because he's got the flight, tons of strength. I mean, like the characters are just like wailing on him, and he doesn't feel anything. So it's just like, there's not much you're gonna do, right? Like he's clearly too strong, and there's nothing that these characters are gonna be able to do to stop him. So the Thunderbolts are very quickly dispatched. And you see DeFontaine is kind of like sitting there, and she kind of starts to realize that she's bit off a little bit more than she can chew, because Sentry starts to get some of these very godly top ideas.
He's got a god complex about him. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, let's go for it. Got a god complex. The power is definitely getting to his head, so Dave Fontaine tries to use this kill switch that she has unsuccessfully. But luckily, her assistant, I think her name was Mel. She has kind of a sub thing going on with Bucky. But she ends up flipping the kill switch and kills Bob, Sentry, whatever we want to call him, right? Which was obviously, you had to kind of know that was not where it was going to end, because it's like, well, that was very anticlimactic. You must have something else in store for this character. And this is where I guess his death kind of awakens the void, right?
Well, can I just say, just to go back to that fight, I mean, if you think about it, it's not like he was taking on Thor or the Hulk or Captain Marvel or anything. It was just a bunch of ordinary, well, with the exception of John Walker and Ava, these are just a bunch of like ordinary people who are very skilled in martial arts and gunplay. Really.
Yes.
So in the grand scheme of things, it's just, it's just basically him beating off a bunch of average Joes.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, so really the God complex, I would say, is kind of unwarranted, because it would be like you saying, yeah, I'm bigger than everybody, but it turns out all you did was just take down a bunch of 5-year-olds, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. But I mean, I would guess that goes to just how mentally unstable he is, right?
That's true.
Just like a little bit of peppering and a little bit of like, oh, hey, cool, these people are supposed to be important, or we went through this and look how easily I was able to get rid of them. But yes, I agree. It's very weird how his character could shift like that. But I think you could chalk it up just to whatever he's struggling with, which is clearly a lot. Because we go to the Void, a lot of trippy things happen here. We see kind of the characters get together, and some of them are kind of dealing with their demons, some of them are not. But to me, this is kind of where things were. I don't know. I have some conflicting thoughts about how we kind of proceed through this, right? Because the idea of the Void, right? He's just a very strong character, right? He's a very strong being. Like he's able to kind of just like send people to like little pocket dimensions or whatever you want to say. But clearly he's totally he's going to overmatch all these characters. So in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, like you're going to have to just talk your way out of it, which I always find to be a little bit of a lazy thing. I've never been a huge fan of that, where it's just like, we're just going to sit here and talk them out of it.
But if you think about it, painted themselves into a corner. It's like there
Yes,
really is no other
yes.
way that they can do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, there's not a whole lot they could do. It's kind of similar to the end of the new um, Hulk movie, whatever, with Red Hulk. They kind of did the same thing where it's like, well, we're just gonna have to, we're gonna have to talk Red Hulk down because we don't have really a good answer for how we're gonna defeat him or fight him.
Right, they're basically going with they're going with the Oprah solution, basically.
Yes. So they're just like, hey, we're gonna talk him down, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it did kind of get me thinking, and I do want to say this about the movie, and I'll get your feelings about this too. I feel like the ultimate villain in this film was depression, right? That's what a lot of this was built up to, which I thought was interesting to have in a Marvel movie, right? Something where you typically are thinking about superheroes. You don't really think of the baggage that they have, right? We've seen some films where they, do their best to tackle that. But this one was really like that, right? Because you see, like, Yelena, right? She's, really struggling with her role. She feels extremely unhappy. She even kind of, is talking with Bob at the very beginning where she talks about how, hey, you just got to push that shit down, right? Like, that's how you deal with depression. You just ignore it. You see, like, the Red Guardian, right? Red Guardian and Yelena have this kind of nice moment where she's, like, kind of talking with him. And you can tell, like, the Red Guardian, like, he's obviously doesn't feel fulfilled, right? Like, he's like a chauffeur, right? He's a limo driver. And he talks about how, he's not really talked with Yelena because he, like, feels depressed, right? His depression's kind of left him to kind of break off or not have that close of a relationship with Yelena. You see how John Walker, through flashbacks, how, he's kind of shaped his life moving forward because, he just kind of, like, left his, wife and kid because he just couldn't deal with, I think, kind of the aftermath of him kind of falling out from grace. Like, he was supposed to be the next Captain America because of everything he did. He just kind of fell out of the limelight. So I think it was kind of interesting that a lot of what we see in this film, and obviously Bob being probably the biggest issue overall, is, being this drug addict that, I think has definitely lost his way in life. Really, depression was the overarching kind of villain for this, right? All these characters have been going through that. Ghost, I guess I need to throw her name in there, even though we don't really see a lot about her. But if I remember correctly, I think her parents got killed or some shit, probably, if I remember for that. But it was, like I said, kind of interesting that depression out of everything, I thought, was the ultimate villain of this. They kind of give Void, I guess, is a little bit more of a, I guess, like a human manifestation of that. But I did think it was interesting that in this superhero film, they do go this route. So I will give them a little bit of credit, but I don't know. What do you think about the Void and kind of everything that happened with that? Yeah.
I mean, I told you this, when we were watching that scene, they're very much borrowing from the Inception playbook, really, with that whole trying to, like, go through the whole dreamscape, going through different layers of reality to try to find their way out. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the thing is that for the past 20 years of Marvel, like, the heroes and the villains both have been presented as this sort of pristine, these pristine individuals who are very certain of themselves. Now we do get hints here and there that maybe things aren't always all right, but for the most part they find a way to power through it, right? I mean, we could take a look at Iron Man, for instance, because in the comics, Iron Man, there was a storyline from back in the 80s called Demon in a Bottle, where Iron Man was basically dealing with alcoholism. And at one point, he loses Stark Industries and he loses his Iron Man suit because he just gets so consumed by his alcoholism, and he kind of has to find his way and recover in order to reclaim the mantle of Iron Man. But what we see with Robert Downey Jr.'s character is very much he's sort of struggling, but he's not really struggling in the same level as what we see in the Thunderbolts, right?
Yeah.
I mean these are people who very much can find their way out and kind of just keep calm and carry on. Whereas with these characters, it's like it's almost as if this is the best that they're going to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they kind of do it's because it's just a way for them to kind of not remember just how hellish their life is, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you look at someone like Red Guardian. I mean, he's living a pretty shitty life, really. Yelena is very much, you know, trying to figure out like where exactly do I go from here because I don't have my sister anymore, right? And the job that I'm doing is, well, it's not very satisfactory. And then we already saw what happened with John Walker. I mean, the man. The man at this point, it's like he's doing everything he can to not end up being another statistic on the you know offing yourself database, right? So it's like it's like everything that we've seen over the past 20 years where these heroes and villains have pretty much tried their best to kind of act like nothing's wrong. It kind of comes on full display here where it's like, yeah, maybe we should talk about this because we haven't been talking about it for 20
Yeah.
years. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe we should bring it into the light, once and
Mm-hmm.
for all.
Yeah, and like I said, it does give it at least something a little bit interesting, right? It was something where I was able to leave and be like, you know what? I don't think they executed it super well because I felt like you had to really dive more into the characters than what you did. It felt very surface level. You kind of only see stuff from Yelena and Walker, and I would say Walker's is just like a one-off thing. So like you don't really, I think, dive enough into the characters' emotional states to justify it.
But what really,
But
I was gonna say, what really bothers me is the fact that with Walker, I kind of get the feeling the filmmakers are saying, well, if you really want to know Walker's background, you gotta watch, Falcon and the Winter
ooh,
Soldier, because we're not gonna rehash all that stuff.
that's
I think
interesting.
I think with Yelena, I think they're a bit more forgiving because of the fact that we only saw her once in Black Widow. So they kind of want to give her more of a spotlight because she didn't have that 8 episode run to kind of open up and explore who she is as a person.
I gotcha.
But
I
that's my
gotcha. That's fair.
takeaway.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So, but yeah, so the characters they talk them off the cliff, so to say, and we see that's how they ultimately beat the void is by just kind of talking down Bob off the ledge, and he kind of takes control of himself, and everything's okay, and they all they see Dave Fontaine nearby, and they're like, hey, let's capture her. And it was all kind of like a guise to like get them all together, and she kind of plays it off like, hey, I really screwed this up. But she's like, you know what? We're just gonna call you guys to do Avengers, and she's like trying really hard. And I mean, I don't know if she's supposed to be this dumb of a character or if that's a part of it. Is like, she kind of like fails upwards at times.
She thinks on her feet. That's how I
She
look
does,
at it.
yeah, she does absolutely think on her feet because she definitely came up with it. So I don't know if she's super smart or super stupid. I guess we'll have to see in the future. But she does, at least for that time, she's able to convince people like, "Hey, cool, these are the new Avengers," and kind of shows them off. And that's the end of the film. And it was, I guess, I will say this, right? I went into this film with pretty much no expectations, right? I think the superhero fatigue is hit me and then some. Especially after I just got done watching not too long ago the Red Hulk, I already forgot the name of it, movie, and it was just so lackluster. I'm like, ugh, I don't really want to watch anything else from this. And I went into this, and well, it's not perfect. I think it did enough for me. I think it kind of brought in some characters that I had some familiarity with, so it kind of made me feel like, oh, I kind of know about them, I guess. They kind of get together. I think, they have some good chemistry. I think that, I would say Red Guardian, always a standout from David Arbor. I just, I can't get enough of his character. He's just so over the top. And Goofy, it's hard not to just like kind of feel it just kind of chuckle at him as he's on screen. But I think it did just enough where I was just like, okay, there was enough there that I was okay with it. I know not a ringing endorsement. I would probably say if I was going to give it a grade, it'd probably like a 2.6 out of 5, right? It just barely beats it. And I think it just did enough. I think that there is some interesting elements for how you bring in the idea of depression into a movie, right? a movie where you're used to seeing the villain just being like, hey, we're just going to throw down and punch people and beat people up. This one, I think, had a lot more emotional contact. I just feel like they didn't give enough time for all the characters to really experience that. And I think that was probably my biggest thing with this film. If you had the extra time, right? And how long? Do you remember how long this movie was? How long was it?
I think it was like roughly around 2 hours and 30 minutes if you include.
Was it really that long?
I mean,
2 hours and 6 minutes. It was 2 hours and 6 minutes.
Well, I mean, I'm also including the post credits and all that stuff.
Oh, whatever. I'm not going to count that. I talk about for like the movie by itself, right? So, I mean, 2 hours. Okay, it's already kind of a little bit long, but I mean, I would say like, hey, this is probably an opportunity where we want to see more of these characters to get you that more invested in kind of their, kind of everyone battling their own demons, so to say. So in a very cathartic way, the Void was kind of the villain that they all needed because of the way for them to, I think, kind of, look at the depression, understand that, they're experiencing maybe not to the same level as Bob, but the same kind of gist of it, and all of them kind of coming together to kind of not only help Bob beat his demon, but for all of them to kind of beat their own demons. So I think there was something that was interesting there. I just don't think that they executed as well as they needed.
Well, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. I mean, okay. I mean, look, it was a fun movie. I wasn't expecting anything like Avengers Endgame or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was a nice, and I'm gonna say nice in quotes. It was a nice way to kind of tie up Phase 5, which was a very messy affair, and I think for all of the for all the drama and all the seriousness they put into the other projects, I think this was a nice way to kind of just give Phase 5 a send off and just let us know, hey, we're reaching into the future and we're moving on, this step. No, I will say this because I've said it before in previous trailer reactions and previous discussions. I think moving forward, like if we are going to see the Avengers, I think these are going to be the Avengers that we see going forward. The traditional Avengers that we've known, like Hulk, Thor, Captain America, all those people. We're not going to. I mean, if we do see them, they'll either be mentioned in passing or they'll kind of have like a very quick Easter egg appearance. Like if you miss it, then
sure.
If you don't watch it, then you've missed it, kind of thing. Because going forward, they're pretty much going to be focusing more on the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. Now, speaking of which, Lee, can you do you want to go and talk real quickly about the post-credit scene?
Yeah, sure. The Fantastic Four is going to be in it.
Well, I mean, they are singing Avengers Tower, and they are just like lounging around. And Bucky mentions how Sam is going to sue them for, I think, trademark infringement, or something like that. So we do get a brief mention of Sam going on. How did you feel about that? Did you feel it was kind of forced, or did you think it was appropriate for them to see the Fantastic Four rocket kind of?
I mean, like, I feel like they've been looking for reasons to tie this all together, right? Like, they want to bring in the X-Men, they want to bring in all this stuff. I didn't really have any issues with them appearing. Like, they were going to appear in some type of credit sequence in some movie. So why not this one? Whatever. They found what they wanted to do. I feel like it was kind of open to that. I think it goes to, I guess, show like, hey, this is how we're going to bring the Fantastic Four into the Marvel as a bigger whole, right? And this was kind of their connection to it. So I didn't really have a problem with it. Hopefully the Fantastic Four does well. Otherwise, you have like an egg on your face because it's like, hey, we're gonna bring all these characters in, and then no one's gonna like them. But hey, you're kind of got to roll with it now. But I didn't have any issues with them appearing like that.
I mean, especially since the Fantastic Four movies, coming up in 2 months' time anyway. Yeah. So unless there's like a mini series that we didn't know about that's coming up, within the next months, then this is going to be the big link. But yeah, Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us out?
Yeah, no, I would say wasn't expecting this. So I'll say, want to thank everyone for listening to us banter for, oh my god, it's like an hour already. Has it really been an
Yeah.
hour, Luca?
Almost, yeah.
Jesus, I don't know how we sit here and talk about this stuff for so long, but I want to thank everyone. If you are listening to this at the end, thank you for watching us. And like Lucas said at the beginning, like, comment, subscribe, add anything in there. Always like to hear from the fans, and appreciate you guys for listening to us complain about movies, or sometimes watch some good movies. So take care.